Hi, it's Imogen, and today I'm gonna do a review on Iris Murdoch's The Nice and the Good. As is typical of Iris Murdoch, it's a novel set in the UK and it has a lot of different characters, all of different, with different personal stories, different traumas, and different goals in life. And in this one, we primarily follow the character of John Duquesne. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've never come across his name anywhere else, so I apologize if that's incorrect. And while he's the main character, you do also enter the minds of the other characters as well, because the main plot is that John Duquesne is a civil servant in London, or based in London, investigating the suicide of his rather peculiar co-worker. However, at the same time, he takes refuge to live in Dorset for a little while with Kate Grey and a bunch of other characters who also stay there and have known him for a very long time. And one really interesting part of the novel is the way that Iris Murdoch contrasts urban London with, natural rural Dorset and the seaside, and the difference in the events that happen in London with the events that happen at the seaside. And as is also typical of Iris Murdoch, one part that I really enjoyed about this novel is the way that she explores the blurred lines of like human morality and all that with human sexuality. And throughout the novel, we follow the way that John Duquesne is constantly having his morals questioned, and as he calls his like personal rules that he lives by, because throughout the novel everyone talks about how he's like a good upstanding man, which he personally doesn't even really believe anymore throughout the book as the events unfold. However, he still tries his best to be that way, and he's often tempted by his lust for things, which often, like, sometimes he gives into, but primarily he does quite well in not doing so. But that also creates this very strong, like, anxious atmosphere throughout the novel, which I think is also quite typical of Iris Murdoch's novels, as he's constantly grappling with this and trying not to follow into his, like, brief lusts that don't really mean anything. And on top of that, she really contrasts lust with like actual intimate love and romance, which ties in with the ending, which I find to be quite beautiful and uplifting, which I don't know. I only read two of her other novels, and the endings were a lot more ambiguous. This was probably like the least ambiguous and most like pleasant I found. I really liked it. Yeah, and beyond that, which kind of ties in as well with the idea of like morals, is the idea of human frailty and fragility, which again is another Iris Murdoch thing, but very much this is like the novel's called The Nice and the Good, so it's like the main force of the novel is like questioning and exploring the way that humans are not really built to work that well, like with our consciousness of our mortality and our lust combined with our ability to really love human beings deeply and romantically and like perplexingly and mind-alteringly, and the way that like our emotions could put us into like spells that completely control us. She really explores that well in this book, and on top of that it's also really funny. Like she often Iris Murdoch writes in quite a jovial way a lot of the time, but this book especially, I think it's, people dub it to be like a romantic comedy a bit, which I think is kind of minimizing considering the philosophical weight of this book. But it is a very funny novel, which I find works perfectly well with the weight that it also has of like, I found it quite emotional. There's a lot of exploration of like PTSD, loss, like grief, both from people dead and also just people lost from your life, which is one of my favorite things to read about, which I don't think I read about very often, that feeling of like grieving for those that you had in your life that are no longer there but still like permeate your life for decades and decades because it just meant that much. And it's often a very melancholic thing, so there's a lot of melancholy through the novel. But despite that, it has I suppose I kind of spoiled the ending a little bit by saying that it's hopeful, but I don't know if that's really a spoiler. Um, Maybe that just, I don't know. It stands out to me because I don't tend to read books with nice endings overall. Like it's not like I deliberately. I mean, okay, maybe I do a little bit, but like it was a surprise when I read this. I wasn't expecting that, so it was quite sweet. Um, and while John Duquesne is staying in Dorset with all these different characters, um, he has like an affair with one of the women there, and it kind of contrasts her personality with his own personality and his morals, as well as the personality and morals of a woman that he falls in love with, which I found really interesting and one of my also favorite aspects of the novel, because I personally constantly criticize myself. I mean, I've actually related to John Duquesne a heavy amount somehow. I mean, I'm not like an aging man in my 40s from London, but as a 21-year-old girl, I'm quite a bit different, other than being from south of England myself. I did relate heavily to that anxiety of constantly trying to follow your own personal morals, and the way that that can make life a lot harder than someone who doesn't care, as other characters in this book present themselves to be, and which he sees in his co-workers. And as more things are revealed about the suicide, the more he's also made to realize how other people live their lives in the way that they do not follow their own set of morals the way he does, and what they believe to be good and true because they don't care, um, and they may just be pretending, they're nice, but they're not good individuals. And the weight of what it means to be a good person contrasted just a nice and hedonistic person. And though at the same time it doesn't really say that that's wrong either, it just kind of shows the difference between these kinds of individuals, and also the kind of happiness one of them, people like that, can have contrasts the happiness of someone who's suffering for most of their life, but then find something truly wonderful and beautiful that really like connects with them and their like intentions for their existence, and that it's quite a lovely thing when you do find that. um and I'm used to Iris Murdoch novels involving people being unsatisfied, so it was quite nice to to have that be in there. But as well as this, there are also children and teenagers that live in Dorset, which John Duquesne interacts with a lot, and that you find like the perspectives are explored a little bit. And I also found it quite beautiful. I mean, the adolescents I found were written quite poorly of all the characters. I think everyone else was written very well, but the adolescents, and accurately, but to real life people, but the adolescents were not, the teenagers were not written very well, I don't think. Or I don't know, maybe it's just something about them bugged me. But the children were written really perfectly well. I found they weren't in the book too much, but I found what was written about them really beautiful and lovely. And the connections they have to like the natural world around them. Like they're always chasing after wildlife and rocks and stones and finding things, and they share this like imagined vision of a UFO that only they can see because they're like twins. They have this weird like spiritual connection. I found that really lovely and like realistic to what children are like, and that's like their own little world amongst all the craziness happening in the rest of the book with all the adults around them. And yeah, I love the connection of the natural world with like the very human emotions, which kind of like relates to how much I love The Waves by Virginia Woolf, and the way that these like cascading, ridiculous, like overwhelming, nauseating human feelings kind of have the backdrop of nature and all the beauty of it. Like there's lots of talks of like graveyards and obviously the sea and trees, and just like a lot of tactile imagery, which I found really lovely. And yeah, so oh, and also I was going to mention Iris Murdoch, despite writing, I mean, this is from the late 60s, where homosexuality was still not really acceptable. As she does in some other novels of hers, she does touch on homosexuality a little with one of the older characters. And again, it kind of touches on that sorrow of like not being able to express these like human emotions of like true connection with a human being or other human beings, plural, because of society inflicting its own set of rules that don't really make any sense and do not connect with like the human ability to love and cherish other human beings, because of the just it doesn't make sense. But the setting of like a character experiencing these nostalgic and sad and heartbroken feelings and longing feelings away from the rest of the world by the beach is I think it's quite profound. It kind of like really distills those emotions and separates it from the rest of the outside world, which is kind of shown by like John Duquesne's crazy like investigation in London, where it's all chaotic and it's kind of claustrophobic. And again, in London, there is unrequited love that's explored as well. Really, just most human emotions, except for like, I don't know. Well, actually, no, there is some homicidal stuff in here. So actually, yeah, pretty much every human emotion is in this book, which I find absolutely wonderful. So if you're into that, if you're into like melancholy and anxiety and also amusement and just anything human, then you should read this book. I'd say it's a good book for starting Iris Murdoch. So, but really any of them that I've read would be. So I hope this video was enjoyable for someone, and thank you for watching.